Hi, this is Group 8. Our group's presentation topic is about use and interpretation of emoji in social media communication. And our group's members are Xiang Junyuan, Hao Yuanzeng, Xin Xinyu, and me. We divide our presentation into 4 parts. Part 1, emoji background and research questions. Part 2, research problem. Part 3, how to interpret emoji. And Part 4, ethics. Now let's begin the part 1, emoji background and research questions. With the development of digital information age, we can see the emergence of emoji everywhere on social platforms like the TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and so on. So what is emoji? Emoji, this is a word, comes from the Japanese word, means picture letter, like this one. It is like a tiny picture or symbol used in text messages and online chats to show different things, feelings, or ideas. When interacting in person, the display of facial expressions like this and body languages like this play a crucial role in strengthening social connections. However, online, particularly when those people haven't met face-to-face before, it can be tough to build the same sense of connection. Scholars, like the ones proposing the model for evaluating cognition, social interaction, and educational practices across different languages, including emoji, believe this approach could also help us understand the meanings of emoji in WeChat. In 1996, Thompson and Folger discovered that angry messages with emoji conveyed varying degrees of hostility compared to those without them. Essentially, emoji served as an instrument for modifying the emotional tone of message and influencing our emotion response to it. Moreover, emoji can fulfill diverse functions in different communication settings, and emoji do different jobs in different situations. Emoji can clarify message intention, compensating for absence of nonverbal clues in writing communication. So, emoji was discovered to have practical uses too, especially as indicator of elocutional force. Despite many studies exploring emoji and their practical rules, there are still some shortcomings in current research. For instance, some researchers overlook particular context within WeChat groups and failed to analyze whether identical emoji convey the different meanings in diverse situations. So our group come up to research questions. First, how do emoji integrate into WeChat for interaction? And second, are the meanings of emoji in different texts consistent?
Okay, so Yanin just talks about emoji background and research questions. I think what she said was really constructive. Now let's move to part 2, which will be research problem. So in this part, we mainly discuss about why we choose emoji interpretation and what remains unknown. So as I mentioned, Yanin talks about emoji, what is emoji, the definition of emoji, but why we choose emoji interpretation. I think the answer lies in the words from Miller. That is to say, words have a dictionary definition, but emoji are nuanced, visually detailed graphics that may be more open to interpretation. Okay, so I think these words mean that since emoji are graphics, not words, so it is more visualized and specific. And graphics might lead to more imagination and more emotion reaction. And so the meaning of it could be really ambiguous. That is also said by Rodriguez. He said, however, the interpretation of emojis can also be ambiguous. So I think that means that the interpretation of emojis are greatly impacted by where we are, what kind of cultural environment we're in. So different cultural environments may give different meanings to the same emojis. And everyone has a different living experience, different characteristic, and also different preference. I think those all factors also contribute to our interpretation of the same emojis. For example, a guy could interpret a smiley face as joy, but another guy could interpret as sarcasm. So the meaning of emoji really depends on the context we live in and the situations we have. The same emojis could have different meanings, even with different environment or different contexts. For example, if we look at the same emojis on different platforms such as Android or iOS, it could be different. Or if we look at the gender issues in emojis, the same emojis sent by a guy or by a girl could be interpreted differently. Okay, so and what remains unknown? Okay, so we do have a lot of papers about emoji or emoji interpretation, and we also have some papers about the interpretation on social media. But I think why we choose this topic is mainly because that those papers are more about analyze from different platforms such as Instagram, WhatsApp. Well, since as you know, Chinese people use WeChat mostly, and nearly every Chinese has his own account of WeChat. So we are really curious about how emojis could be interpreted on WeChat. That is different. Is that different from Instagram or WhatsApp? Okay. And we are really curious about do WeChat users also have the same interpretation of the same emojis? Because we heard about that some rumors or some sayings that a smiley face could be interpreted as joy by seniors, but it could be interpreted as sarcasm by youngsters. I think that is really fun. So I think these are our research problem, and thank you for listening.
Moving on to part 3, we are going to talk about how to interpret emoji. Here's a question. Do you think emoji can replace words? Well, from a perspective, I think in some cases, emoji can really replace words. For example, now, every one of us these days use social media platforms, to keep in touch with our family members and friends. Sometimes when we don't want to express or show our feelings with exact words, instead we tend to rely on emoji to do that. So yeah, I really think emoji in some way can replace words. As for our research, we decide to choose text analysis as our research method. Well, according to Catherine, text analysis is the kind of research method that involves a close encounter with the work itself, which means we don't have to involve so many participants in the research. It's just about the work itself. It's like an examination of the details without bringing them to more presuppositions than we can help. And also, according to Amy, researchers can also use this kind of research to find out about the purposes, messages, and effects of communication content. As for why we choose this method, well, our goal is to figure out how to interpret, how to analyze emoji in a social media context. So it's basically a task-based research. So that's the reasons why we choose task analysis as our research method. And also, this research method enables us to have a better understanding of the intention of an individual, group, or institution. That is something that we should do to understand why and how a speaker in the WeChat group or other social media platform choose to use emoji in a certain way or under certain circumstances. And also, this research method enables us to identify differences in communication in different contexts, to realize the possible meaning in conversation, and to analyze the consequences of communication content. Sometimes we also need to analyze why emoji can be used in different ways under different circumstances. As for how we conduct our research with task analysis, there are basically three main stages. The first one, we need to select the content from the WeChat group, as you can see here. And then we use the framework proposed by Yue for the analysis. Yue mainly outlined 8 functions of emoji. Emoji has basically 8 functions when we use emoji in the social media platforms. For example, the first one, we can use emoji to signal the propositional attitude, the underlying the utterance, and which will be difficult to identify without the aid of emotion. Just like I said earlier, sometimes we don't want to express our feelings with words. Instead, we will use the emoji. And also another example is that we can use emoji to communicate a higher intensity of a propositional attitude, which has already been coded verbally. Just like you have already expressed your feeling, you still want to use emoji to amplify, to intensify your emotion or your feeling. Sometimes we also can use emoji to show our sense of humor, and also emoji can have the function of irony, and so on. These are the framework that we decided to use to analyze the emoji used in the context, and then we would draw the conclusion. For example, this is the conversation selected from the WeChat group. The speakers, they are talking about, they're complaining about the bad weather, mainly about the rainy day. And then they use the emoji to show their feeling. Like speaker A says, "Why it is raining again today?" Speaker B says, "Yeah, I have no comment on it. I have nothing to say about it." And then speaker A used the grumpy faces to show that she is really sad and angry about the weather. So we use the framework to analyze the emoji. The speakers have already expressed the bad feeling about the rainy day verbally, but this feeling is beyond words. Thus, the grumpy face were used to amplify their feeling of sadness and disappointment. And these grumpy faces used here reflect on the principle 2 of the principle proposed by Yue. That is how we analyze the emoji. So that's my part.
Because our study focuses on analyzing the use of emojis in the specific WeChat rooms, it is a private space instead of a public space. Therefore, we need to consider many ethical issues here. The following are some of the ethical principles that we have to know and follow throughout our research. First and foremost, honesty and integrity are important. We must report results, methods, and procedures accurately and cannot fabricate any information or deceive the participants. Second, objectivity and respect are essential. Avoiding bias is crucial in the data analysis. We must actively work to minimize bias and avoid self-deception. Meanwhile, respect the participants' willingness. For example, some discussions within the WeChat group may involve emotional or sensitive topics. Participating in such discussions could potentially lead to emotional distress or discomfort. Finally, confidentiality and anonymity must be maintained. We must ensure the privacy of all those involved in the research by protecting their personal information and ensuring their anonymity throughout the research process. By adhering to these ethical principles, we can conduct research responsibly and ethically, while respecting the privacy and rights of all the participants. After understanding the ethical principles, let's move on to the ethical process involved in our research. First of all, before we start analyzing anything, we have to explain to the participants the purpose of our study. In addition, we need to ensure that everything is confidential and anonymous to protect their privacy. Obtaining consent from each participant is vital, and we need to make sure that they understand our research process and certain relative requirements. After providing them with the information sheet and obtaining consent from the participants, we need to fill out the consent form as well as the participant information sheet and upload the relevant ethical documents. When analyzing the data, we need to ensure that the data is clear, objective, and minimizes harm to the participants involved. For example, if the results of the analysis are subjunctive or the researcher misinterprets the original meaning of the participants, or if the analysis process accidentally exposes the privacy of the participant, they might feel uncomfortable. So we need to pay attention to that point. Once the analysis is complete, we need to report the results to the participants, get their feedback, and make sure that no one's identity is revealed or exposed when the research results are open to the public. By strictly adhering to these ethical guidelines throughout the research process, we are committed to upholding the principles of integrity and respect for the rights of each participant. We aim to safeguard the well-being and dignity of all the research participants. Through these practices, we hope to create a transparent research environment and do the research in a responsible and respectful manner.
Okay, now here come to the last part, which is conclusion. So by reading the literature and understanding the previous research methods, we divided our research into 4 parts in the group presentation. We first made clear the research question: how do emoji integrate into WeChat for interaction? Are the meanings of emoji in different texts consistent? Then we deeply studied these problems and discussed why we choose the emoji interpretation and what still remains unknown. Then we focused on how to analyze the role and influence of emoji in that context. Finally, we discussed the ethical issues involved in the research and emphasized the importance of respect for the research object and transparency and fairness in the research process. These contents together constitute the conclusion of our group presentation, which shows our comprehensive research and analysis on the use and understanding of emoji in WeChat. Okay, that is our group's presentation. Thank you for listening.